Hi, all. Thank you very much for coming to this special seminar. My name is Daniel Dunn. I am an associate professor in the School of the Environment and director for the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation Science for a few more days. And this is part of our big end of year event. We try to bring in a big name to talk to us about things that we do. The center is particularly focused on applied work and getting the things that we're doing here at the university out there in the world. And therefore, we were particularly excited to get Dr. Nikki Sims-Chilton here today to speak to us from her current role as the Manager of Science Engagement and Impact at DETSI, but also because of her long career, which I will go into now without trying to be too embarrassing about it. Dr. Sims-Chilton is an accomplished research, communication, and engagement specialist with a strong passion for elevating the profile of STEM. In particular, she currently holds a leadership role as a director on the board of Women in STEM in Australia, where she continues to champion diversity and inclusion in STEM fields. She has successfully designed and delivered research projects as well as communication and engagement strategies and programs. But important to us, Nikki started her science journey at QUT, completing an undergraduate degree in IT and ecology before jumping over here to do her PhD with Professor Yvonne Buckley at the then Ecology Center, which was sort of subsumed within CBCS a few years back, unless Rod says otherwise. Is Rod here? No, he can't argue with me. Throughout her career, Nikki has worked across a variety of government organizations. I think I listed them before, see if I get it right, but it was the Office of the Chief Scientist, SEQ Water, and now with DETSI. There are probably others in there as well. Okay. All right. Okay. Very interestingly, among the other jobs that Nikki's held, she was involved in a variety of unique and impactful projects, including her role as ABC Radio Brisbane community correspondent and her coordination of a successful Guinness World Record attempt for largest practical science lesson. So I don't see Gurian in the audience, but I figured he would be like all over this. He's like, I'm going to do that. Nikki managed to get 2,900 students in the prac, and I know it's amazing, yeah. That Gurian recently tried to get about 3,000 students here from local high schools. So I think the two of you together will just get everybody in. Okay, so with that, I'm super excited to welcome Dr. Sims-Chilton, who will also do the acknowledgement of country for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and thanks. Please let me know if you can't hear me. Thank you, Carissa, and I believe Josie Caldine for nominating me to come along today, making me feel very special. Maybe I'll use the mouse. There we go. Okay, so I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to their elders past and present and acknowledge them as our first scientists and our first communicators in this country. So before I start, I want you to, or you don't have to close your eyes, but if you want to close your eyes and think about what you were doing 20 years ago. Some of you might have been in primary school looking in the audience. Don't tell me if you were, because it'll make me feel really old. I was here and I started my PhD here. So a little bit of history. Back in 2005, I started here in the School of Integrative Biology in the Ecology Center. And I was attending roof parties. So I've just been up on the roof this morning and that looks very different to the roof that had the secondhand couch, the pull-out tables. It was very grungy, but very cool. There were lots of dress-up parties and I won't share any photos today for the respect of my colleagues in the audience, but I do have some photos of people in this audience from 20 years ago. And Friday drinks were a thing, which I believe is still a thing. So some things have changed, but others haven't. Now, when I came here and started my PhD, I needed a USB stick. And this is the USB stick I bought at I think it was called the Commissariat or some kind of store that was on campus. This cost me $95 and it's 512 kilobytes. So that just shows how long ago I was here. Now, I just want to show you, does anyone remember who had one of these shirts? That was our School of Integrative Biology shirt. I had this polo shirt, like I've still got these. How embarrassing is that? And this is my thesis. So And I thought maybe you'd be interested being in this centre about the work that I did during my PhD. So I had a scholarship from the CRC for Australian weed management, and they asked me to look at the evaluation of the biocontrol program against groundsel bush, which is a weed we have in southeast Queensland and northern New South Wales. And I guess that was my first link into Queensland government, because in the 1900s, the weed was introduced into Queensland and New South Wales from North America, seen as a nice bushy shrub, and soon became a really big pest in the 1950s. So in the 1960s, the Queensland government decided to conduct a biocontrol program. So they imported about 7 agents from North America to Australia. They did all the testing and released all of these agents. And just like any government, they ran out of money and didn't look at whether the biocontrol agents were having an impact on the populations of groundsel bush. So that's what I did for 4 years. I measured groundsel bush plants. I did exclusion experiments in the field and in the lab, and I did some statistical modelling of those plants. I guess you want to know what I found out. That the biocontrol agents are around and they do work to reduce the size of the plants, maybe a little bit of the spread of the plants, but they are still around. They're just not an issue anymore. They've been taken over by things like lantana, which is more of a problem. But also a lot of my field sites are now car parks, shopping centres, housing estates. So if you're looking for somewhere to invest, look for groundsel bush, because that's where the good land is. Or climate also had an impact. So I did some climate modelling. This is back in the day of Climex. I don't know if anyone's heard of Climex, but it showed that groundsel doesn't really survive in dry conditions. And it was a pretty dry time when I was doing my PhD as well. So that's what I spent 4 years of my life doing. And then I finished my PhD and went, what next? And I think that's something that you guys now, anyone who's doing a PhD, are really lucky to have, is that connection to government and industry, which I don't think we had as much back when I was doing my PhD. Just a little bit of history as well about the lab that I was in. So Yvonne is pictured second from the left up there. She was my PhD supervisor, but she made us go on a lab retreat. I don't know if they are still things either. And we all had to either write a paper or review each other's paper in this tiny little house in Kyogle in northern New South Wales. So again, I don't know if those things still happen, but yeah, that was 20 years ago and we all look a tad younger there. But what I want to talk about is the transferable skills that you learn as a PhD student. How many here are doing their PhD currently? Oh, yeah, a fair few. Okay. So when I did my PhD, I guess the thought was that you tend to go into academia, and I had no real idea, like I said, of what I was going to do next. But what I learned is all of these skills up on the board here. I'm not going to read them out to you, but they're all the skills you learn when you do your PhD, and they are so transferable into other jobs, not necessarily spraying weeds with insecticide. You may or may not use that in your future life, but all of these other things you'll use in any job that you go to. And I didn't make these up. These are from a website, but I'm sure you use them each and every day in your roles. And another link back to government is that picture there is the Women in STEM prize that we won for our projects back in, I don't know what year it was. There were 4 of us. Jen Fern's missing from that picture, but Queensland Women in STEM prize has been going for a long time under various different names. And I was lucky enough to be part of a winning group of that, and then went on to manage that program when I worked for Queensland Government. So how did I go from finishing my PhD to being a public servant? Well, I had a really nice friend who knew I didn't have a job when I finished my PhD, and she gave me a call one day and said, and it was really unfortunate, someone's unwell and needs to take some long time off. We need someone to come and manage our health research fellowship program, which was a big grants program that gave out money to hospital workers, clinicians, and researchers for health research. So I went into that office to do a 6-week stint, and I ended up staying in government and haven't really left. I then, in that same period of time, that same friend, her husband was offered a job as an advisor to the science minister, and he couldn't take up that role, but he recommended me. And so I went for an interview with the Minister for Science at the time, and he, that's my phone ringing, how embarrassing is that? I thought I turned that off. My apologies, everyone. I will put that on silent. I do have a daughter home at 6 today, so that's why it was on. So yes, very good friend to have. They essentially recommended me for this job with the science minister, and I spent a year with that science minister advising him on science and innovation. And someone asked me this morning about whether a PhD was worth it, and would I do it again? And I don't know whether I'd do it again. That you shouldn't have regrets in life. You do things for a reason, and but I think the advantage it gave me, it's never really given me a leg up in a job, I don't think, but what it gave me was a bit of status. So when the minister would introduce me to key stakeholders, he would introduce me as Dr. Nikki Sims-Chilton. And I think having that for him was to show that as a political leader, he had someone who had a qualification and, a knowledge of some sort of area of science when he was advising people in science or talking about science. So yes, I think the status thing for him was important. And so I feel like that's probably one of the advantages of doing a PhD for me in terms of my career. The disadvantage of working for a minister is when you change government. So I was on maternity leave at the time and the government switched colours. And so I got a nice letter in the mail saying, sorry, you've lost your job, because obviously new ministers don't use advisors from a different political party. I had no political affiliation with any party, so I was purely there as the science advisor, but they don't know that. So I went back to my old job in Queensland Health. In government, you get to kind of keep your job usually for a period of time. And I wasn't really getting the intellectual stimulation I needed after having 2 kids. So at the time when I worked for the science minister, I obviously met some really cool people, including the Queensland chief scientist at the time, which was Dr. Jeff Garrett. So I sent him an email and said, hey, Jeff, would you like to have a coffee? I need a new job and I'm looking, do you have any contacts? Anyway, we went and had coffee and he said, look, I really want to develop this science engagement strategy. I need someone to do that. Would you be interested? Absolutely. So I applied for that job, got that job and worked for the chief scientist for 3 years. Then after doing a few science engagement programs, so I did the Flying Scientist program where we send, and some of you may have heard of these, we send scientists out into regional and remote areas in Queensland to talk to the community and to schools about their science and the work they do. So taking science to the regions, which was really fun. And I did that with, Deanna was here before. Where is she? Oh yeah, we went to Longreach together and did some work there. I also ran the Queensland Women in STEM program and prize with the Queensland Museum and the Guinness World Record, which I'll talk about in a minute. So really cool stuff, but it was time for me to move on. So I went and worked at SEQ Water, which is the bulk water authority in Queensland. So SEQ Water manage all the dams and then they provide the water to your water utility company. So not a lot of people realise the difference between SEQ Water and all your utilities. So on your bill, when you've got your bulk water charge and your other water charges, the bulk water charge is the state government managing the dams. That's the charge for that. So I did a lot of comms and engagement at SEQ Water, as well as some social research projects. So looking at community attitudes towards recycled water in particular. And I also worked in the research team. So I managed the water quality research program. So in SEQ Water, I wasn't really the research scientist doing the work, but I was coordinating the research project. So we had some partnerships with UQ, doing some work on some of our dams as well. So a few different jobs at SEQ Water. And then after 4 years at SEQ Water and being on call, so one thing about working at SEQ Water is you're always on call, when it's your shift because of the dams. If it rains a lot, as you know, we have to let water out of dams and things like that. So that's a tough gig as well. So I looked for another opportunity and I had another friend, not the same friend, so I've got some really good friends, who said there's a job coming up in DETSI. I think you'd be really good at it, and it's called Manager of Science Engagement and Impact, and that's where I am today. So some of the cool things that I've been able to do throughout my career, as I said earlier, the Engaging Queenslanders in Science strategy, the first strategy of its kind in Queensland, was about getting more people interested and aware of the science happening in Queensland. So they still have this strategy in Queensland government. It's just a new version. We did the largest practical science lesson, as you said before, Daniel, and that was a really complicated project. So my problem solving skill that I learned during my PhD really came to the fore here, because it's really official. You have to get this person from overseas or in Australia. So the Australian Guinness World Record person wasn't available. There's, I think, only a couple in Australia. So this lady came from Italy. We had to fly her over. She got here, she got out of the car and realized she didn't have the right shoes. So she had to borrow the shoes from the driver. Like, it was a complex project, but we got there in the end with the 2,900 students. That's now been trumped, but it was over at the convention centre, so it was on the news. It was, yeah, a really fun day, but quite a stressful job, actually. When I was in the minister's office, we released the Science Innovation Action Plan, which was some funding put towards science and innovation. So that's just one of the things when you're an advisor to the minister. You get to go with him to launches and events, but also advise on policy and meet with the department and understand the landscape of Queensland. And then at SEQ Water, I did comms campaign. So I did the safety campaign for the dam. So keep the fun alive. If you've seen those pictures, I went out to the dam and helped with that. I wasn't obviously the professional photographer or the wakeboarder, but I did take my boat out there. So if you see the boat in the photos with the fishermen, that's my boat. So using my own props for work. We won an award for the Water Future program, which was a program that we had at SEQ Water around getting the community on board with what our water future looks like and different options for our water in the future, including recycled water, desal water, and our water in our dams. And we did a lot of community engagement events. So that's a picture from World Science Festival Ipswich, where we talked about, saving water at the time. So SEQ Water does lots of different campaigns. And the other thing that Daniel also mentioned is I'm on the board of Women in STEM Australia, which is a not-for-profit organisation. And we do some events, not a lot, because we are not-for-profit and we're all volunteers, but a couple of things that I'd like to highlight are we do online seminars. So if you follow our website, you'll be able to see, or our LinkedIn page, when we do these. So a recent one we did this year was how to network. Because a lot of people feel really uncomfortable networking. And, when you walk into a room and everyone's already in their conversations with their cups of tea and you're kind of standing there going, who do I talk to? What do I do? So it was about giving tips, particularly we did one for mid-career and one for early career professionals on how to network effectively. We've started STEM strolls, and the aim of STEM strolls are around getting women in STEM together in regional and remote locations. So we're all pretty lucky in Brisbane. We get so many networking events that, we can attend. They're always accessible if you live in Brisbane. But when you live outside of Brisbane, your networks are obviously much more diverse. So we created this thing called STEM Strolls, and I've hosted the two on the Sunshine Coast. There've been one in Townsville and then throughout Australia in, I think, Ballarat, Bendigo, Ulladulla, a few other places. So if you're interested in, or if you live in the regions and you want to host a STEM stroll or help out, you're welcome to come and see me about that. And the other thing we do at Women in STEM Australia is advocate for different issues affecting women in STEM. So this year we did a submission to the inquiry into the issues related to menopause and perimenopause, which is very topical at the moment for us middle-aged women. So we did a survey of all of our members. Membership is free. It's not a paid membership. And then we wrote a paper and submitted that to the Senate inquiry. So some pretty cool stuff happening on Women in STEM Australia. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about DETSI. Who knows much about government? I don't want to tell you guys stuff you already know. Is there people kind of, yeah? So I'm in the Department of the Environment, Tourism, Science and Innovation, otherwise known as DETSI. We have a minister, Andrew Powell. He is our minister for the whole portfolio. And then we have a Director General who reports to our minister. We have a Queensland Chief Scientist, who many of you know, Professor Kerry Wilson, and a Queensland Mine Rehab Commissioner. So those two positions are somewhat independent, but somewhat report to the minister. It's a little bit of a grey area, but they're deemed as independent people. And then this is our department. So as you can see, science is kind of a small fish in a big sea here. We're competing with environment heritage, environment regulation, parks. Parks is huge. And everyone knows parks, and our rangers have a really good reputation. They have that beautiful brown uniform with the possum on. It's recognisable. So science is this, small part of DETSI. We have about 400 staff in the science area where I sit, and 300 of those are actually scientists who work on the ground, who do modelling, monitoring, and look at all things related to environmental science particularly. And we have 3 branches within science, so coastal biodiversity and information, water and catchments, and then we have our science development and Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist. So today when I'm referring to the 300 scientists, it's those 2 on the left-hand side, CBI and WC, we call them. Because Science Development Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist do the more external facing comms and engagement, we do the internal facing comms and engagement. Now, I don't expect you to read this whole slide, but I just wanted to demonstrate the breadth of work we do across the science division in those 2 areas. So we do everything from, soil science, air quality, water quality. We have the biggest wave basin in the Southern Hemisphere. I don't know if anyone's ever seen the wave basin, but it's pretty cool when it's in action. That's out at Deagon. We have the Queensland Herbarium, which many of you may know, out at Toowong. We have species habitat and modelling, social science, earth observation science. So there's a whole range of science that we do within government, for government, mostly for government clients. But my little team, our role is to amplify the work of our government scientists, or part of our role. So we're a newly established team within the science division. I was employed as the first manager of that team, so we were established nearly 3 years ago now. And we came up with this little saying about our team, is that we connect the people, the science, and the knowledge to create impact. So we have 4, key roles in our team, and that's to, as I said, raise the profile of Queensland government science, strategic partnerships, and I'll talk about that in a minute, how we're working with UQ on strategic partnerships. We have a role in our team around reef coordination. So we have a lot of reef projects that go on in the science division, and we need to report those through to the Office of the Great Barrier Reef, which sits in that environment arm that I showed on the slide before. So this person actually coordinates all the science side of the reef projects for the environment team. And we have a system called Paris, which is our portfolio and reporting information system. So that's where we store all of our science project information. So it's kind of a bit like a project management and reporting system. So I'm going to talk firstly about how we raise the profile of Queensland government science and why we would do that. So as a university, you guys want to raise the profile of your science because you need money. I assume that's one of the key drivers. But for us, we're a government organisation, so we don't apply for grants, we give out grants. But what we want to do is build public trust in science generally, but also in the government. I mean, a lot of people don't trust the government, so our role is to help people trust the government and the work that we do, particularly in science. Obviously, we want to make sure we're transparent and accountable for the work that we do in government. We want to be able to influence our stakeholders with the science that we do. So a lot of science we do informs landholders, managers on the ground, particularly obviously in our reef catchments. And we want people then to make informed decisions about what they do. So if you're a farmer and you're managing a property, and we've got some science to show that if you reduce X chemical, it will reduce the impact on the water, but it will also increase your yield. That's the kind of advice that we try and provide to our landholders. And we also want to foster collaboration between the science division, departments, but also with yourselves in universities. So the key things we do in our team are around connection, and that's around connecting our scientists to other people in the outside world, but also to each other. Communication, that's about translating the work that they do externally, and obviously collaboration is really important as well. So just a bit of an example of how our information flows. So our DETSI scientists, so those 300 scientists that I talked about earlier, we go and meet with them, we talk to them, we understand what they do, and my little team puts that information out through to our science division internally, so I'd call that internal comms. But then we also give some of that information to our corporate team. So they don't sit in science division, they sit out of science division. So I guess the advantage of us being within science division is that we're always around the scientists. So I don't know if you guys have comms people within the schools or within this area, but you obviously have a corporate comms team that sit in your corporate area of UQ. So I just want to plug the advantage of having comms people within, embedded with the science. And then they put out the communications to the department, but also to the public. So I'm not actively updating DETSI's LinkedIn page, but I'm giving them content to put on the LinkedIn page. So some of the things that we have done, so LinkedIn is one key area we post on, so on the Queensland Environment LinkedIn page. And one of the cool things we did recently was about the world's first canned pineapple that was invented in Queensland in our labs. It's now called the Chemistry Centre, but it was previously at Indooroopilly. We do things like World Science Festival, so we had a soil science stand at World Science Festival. We publish in industry publications, which is the example down the bottom. So that's the East Trinity Restoration Project that we've done up in Cairns. And we do a quarterly highlights report. At the moment, that's an internal only report, but it's really important to communicate with your internal stakeholders because sometimes they're actually more valuable than our external stakeholders. And I think it's something that we forget sometimes about talking to each other more so than talking outside. Two other cool projects we've done are virtual tours. So you can click on and I can send these slides or I can share the links or however works best. But this is a virtual tour of the Queensland Herbarium. So the Queensland Herbarium is inaccessible to the public. If you're a researcher, you can get access to it. But as a general person in the community, you can't access the Queensland Herbarium. So this virtual tour takes you through the herbarium to see inside what it's like in the collections area, but also gives you little videos and snippets of the history of the herbarium and other information. So that's a really cool comms project that we worked on for them. And we did the same with the Brigalow catchment study. And I know some of you probably work in the Brigalow area, but again, this is a really cool virtual tour on the ground in our Brigalow site. The Brigalow catchment study is the longest running catchment study in the Southern Hemisphere. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that's what I've been told by my scientists. And again, this has interactive videos and you can see everything that the scientists do in the Brigalow catchment study. This one in particular takes a long time to load, so please be patient if you're using it. There's a lot of data-heavy information in there. Now I'm going to switch to strategic partnerships. So a little while ago, we did an audit of the agreements, contracts, MOUs, everything we had with universities, and I probably won't surprise you, there was a lot. So anytime a scientist wanted to do some work with a university, they would involve the legal team, they would get an agreement drawn up, they would negotiate IP, they would negotiate costing structures, and then create a contract or an agreement. And we decided that this was particularly inefficient for scientists to be spending their time negotiating with university lawyers, as well as our lawyers. So we decided to set up an alliance agreement and we approached UQ as our first university. And we've established what we call the DETSI UQ Alliance, the umbrella agreement. There's a few different names, flagship agreement, but essentially that's to work with the university and particularly with the School of Environment on projects that benefit us as government. So the work that we do with UQ under this agreement is to address government priorities. And I don't know how much you guys know about how priorities are set in government, but one of the key documents that you should be aware of if you're not already is the charter letter. So when a new government comes in, the Premier will write every single minister a letter basically saying this is your job for the next 4 years. Here's your key priorities. This is what you need to deliver. And so within that charter letter, that sets our priorities as a department. And then obviously flowing down from that, there'll be other priorities that come up. But if you want to know what a government department's priorities are, jump online and look for the minister's charter letter and that will give you a key idea. So I've only got the front page there, but they're publicly available on the internet. So this is just a very simplified example of what the umbrella agreement with UQ looks like. So we have a governance structure which involves different levels of people across DETSI and UQ. And within the umbrella, I guess what's all pre-negotiated in this agreement is the strategic themes, which you can see here on the bottom left. That they're the areas we're working in under this alliance. It's not to say we can't work outside of these, but these are the key themes that are of interest to both parties. We've pre-negotiated our IP, we've pre-negotiated our costs, and we've talked about the government priorities. So that's all set in stone. So as a scientist then, when they want some work done with the University of Queensland, they can just talk about what the project is going to be, what the milestones should be, what the deliverables are, without having that back and forth. That's kind of our, I guess, easy way to explain how this agreement and how this partnership works. And we hope that this is of benefit to both sides, not only reducing admin, but also making things consistent, because what we found in that audit was there was inconsistencies in IP arrangements and costs and other things, and we want to make things fair across the board. So how do you use this agreement? Elisa is in the audience here. So Elisa is your key contact on UQ's side, and I'm the key contact on DETSI's side. So Elisa and I are in contact quite regularly. We have governance meetings that we're both involved in with your head of school and our Deputy Director General. So I guess I just want to emphasise that it's mostly one way. It's not to say it can't be two-way, but this is about university addressing government priorities. So we will generally come to you or come to Elisa and say, hey, we've got this work we need done. Do you know anyone who could do it in UQ? If you want to work with government, that's totally okay, but you need to make sure it aligns with our priorities and understand how those priorities work. So yeah, feel free to, can I give you Elisa, feel free to touch base with Elisa if you have any questions from UQ's side, and then obviously the scientists will come to me on my side. So that kind of brings me to the end of my talk, and I'm happy to do a bit of Q&A, but I guess I just want to bring it back down to the dots. So my talk was around connecting the dots, and I think that the dots I've connected throughout my career are science, partnerships, and communication. They're the three areas I've worked in throughout my whole career. And I guess the power in networking and connecting the dots is so important. And I guess as an early career, I was never an early career researcher. Maybe as a PhD student I was, but I never went into academia. But the way I got those jobs and the way I moved around in my career was around connecting the dots, doing science, communicating about the work that I do, and building partnerships. So yeah, encourage you to all connect the dots and build your networks. Yeah, that's probably about it, I think.
Thank you very much, Nikki. I think one of the things I just want to re-emphasize there from early in your presentation was the importance of friends. So, and the importance of networking in general. And I think that's one of the things that the center and all the centers within the university bring, and something that we need more within the school of the environment as we grow and try to figure out the various themes within the school of the environment, is figure out how we can network, what the institutional structures that will allow us to do that networking are. And I think it's a really critical part of it, and it will result in jobs and more friends. So I'm looking forward to that and hearing more about that. Okay, we have some time for questions. I will run around with the mic. Make me run. Thanks, Peter, really.
Thank you, Nikki. Just what you said about the farmers' pesticide use and water quality and improving their yield made me wonder, do you work with other government departments as well? Like, would DAF play a role in communicating that information, and how is the relationship with departments beyond DETSI?
Yeah, so we work really closely with DAF. Well, the scientists work really closely with DAF. They probably do more of those conversations. So they have extension officers and staff on the ground in the regions. We don't have a lot of scientists who work in the regions, except for one team, which is our Paddock Tarif team. So they do a lot of work. So I'd say we rely on DAF for that communication, but DAF usually contract us to do the science, and then they do the communication side of things. But obviously when we're on the ground and there's scientists doing work in a farmer's banana crop, for example, the scientists also have to be able to communicate that as well. So it's really important that we have that relationship with DAF, but also that the scientists are capable of communicating well and effectively. So I guess that's one thing that I should have emphasize more as well, is the value in communicating and learning how to communicate your science very easily, quickly, and in plain English. And I'm looking forward to the speed talks this afternoon. They're my favorite because it's a real skill to be able to sell your work and yourself in 3 minutes, 5 minutes, your elevator pitch. But when you work in government and a fast-paced area like a minister's office, the minister doesn't want to hear the detail. The minister cares about what impact it's going to have on the community, how much does it cost, those sort of key things. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Peter. Peter is someone I might have a few photos of too.
Online from Jed Calvert. Thanks, Nikki. In the presentation blurb, it was mentioned that approval of the first collaborative DETSI projects with UQ happened in 2025. Could you sketch some of those out if possible?
So Elisa might be able to help me. They've got very similar titles. They're around biocondition. So that is with our joint remote sensing program staff. And then on the UQ side of things is at Stuart Finn's area. And then the second partnership is with Rod Fensham. So it's, biocondition, biodiversity type work. Sorry, I can share more details later if people want to know, or Elisa could share more details, but that's the two that have been stood up. Yep.
Thanks so much, Nikki. I have a broader question. So I guess interest in STEM in Australia seems to be waning. So I'm a QT, so I can't speak for UQ, but one of the reasons there was all this drama with the Faculty of Science was that enrollment in STEM in secondary schools is dropping off a cliff, apparently. So obviously that has big upstreams implication for student numbers at universities. So I was wondering in the government if that's a concern. So to me, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect of, science, innovation, climate change. We need all these technical people to support the economy, blah, blah, blah. But then at the same time, the actions, the money doesn't seem to support that at times. So I don't know. So, tricky question, sorry. But I was wondering if in the government, if that is a concern about STEM education from primary, secondary school into university is something that is kind of being flagged at the moment.
Yeah. Not so much in my particular area because I work with the government scientists, but certainly the Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist, that's one of their key goals is to increase the number of students participating in STEM. That's a huge, huge goal and not just the role of the Queensland Chief Scientist Office, but they do a lot of outreach activities to try and encourage that. I guess, as parents, if anyone is a parent in the room, parents and teachers have more influence over children and their choices than anyone else. So if you are a parent of a child who hates science, i.e. me, you've got a bit of work to do. I don't know why she hates science, but she hates science apparently. So teachers have, a big influence over what kids choose when they go into senior schooling. So the more we can encourage teachers to be positive about STEM and science and also demonstrate the importance of STEM skills and, I guess highlight that as a scientist, it doesn't mean you're going to go work in a lab. And that's still to this day, if you ask a child to draw a scientist, there are still a majority of the kids are drawing a man in a lab coat. And that's the kind of stereotype we need to keep working on. I guess it's going to take some time, but we're trying. So yes, a priority for government from the chief scientist area, definitely. But I don't know what we can do as a society other than encourage.
I have one while people are contemplating. I'll just ask mine, then I'll go. What has worked in terms of trying to stem the current trend of public lack of faith in science? Like there's been a change in their opinions around experts and science, and I'm just curious from your perspective what you think is working in terms of fighting back against that.
I think COVID worked. COVID actually increased the trust in science significantly. Also, obviously, created a bit of conversation around the lack of trust in vaccines and science, and I'm not here to get into a debate about that, but there's actual research into the effect of the COVID communication and the increase of trust in science. Look, scientists are trusted more than politicians. So, as a government, we've got some work to do. Yeah, there are some nice politicians who are trustworthy. But I think what works is making sure we communicate about it and making sure that we demonstrate that, we have integrity and that we do good science. I think that's a term someone's used previously in a government, good people, good science or something like that. So I don't know if there's a silver bullet for what works, but keep communicating about the work and be the face of your work so people trust people when they can see people. So if you don't have your photo on LinkedIn, I recommend you put your photo on LinkedIn. That is such a, there's statistics around not the level of trust so much, but if you don't have your photo on LinkedIn, there's a really high statistic that no one will look at your profile. So if you're looking for a job and you don't have a photo, people won't look at your profile. So that's just a little tip. And that might help increase trust because people can see you as a real person. You know, we're all people and we all are interested in people and what we do. So I think that's important.
Thanks so much for your talk, Dr. Nikki. I'm a geoscientist and I'm interested in critical minerals. I'm a volcano scientist interested in understanding how volcanoes accumulate these metals, which are essential for renewables. And I saw you had Earth observations and systems as part of your themes. And I wonder how much geoscience, if any, is included in that. Thanks.
A lot, and I'm just for 3 weeks. Right now, I am the Director of Earth Observation and Social Science, so I should know more than I do. But we have a whole remote sensing team and we work with UQ in the Joint Remote Sensing Program. So we do a lot of Earth observation science in relation to land clearing, regrowth. People in the audience probably know more than I do about the work that we do in this space, but also looking at, pasture biomass and things like that as well. So does that answer your question about what was your question again? How much?
Thanks.
Yeah. No, I think she's good.
Was there a follow-up we needed, or is there?
No, I don't think so. No.
Okay. All right. Sorry.
Thank you, Nikki. That was really interesting. I learned a lot. I wanted to ask if someone here just finished their undergraduate degree or master's or even PhD, and they want to come work with DETSI, with your unit or others, what are your key tips? What should they do? Because they don't have all those connections yet and the dots.
Yeah.
And what are the main tips?
So I guess my first suggestion would be make those connections while you're doing your undergrad, your PhD, your master's, whatever you're doing. Go to networking events, particularly, like I said, for those of you in Brisbane, there's often networking events. So Women in Technology often host events in Brisbane. I'm sure there's lots of science ones around that I haven't been to in a long time because I don't live in Brisbane anymore. But then we do have industry placement programs within government. So the website, I think it's called Career Pathways with the government. So you can do internships with government. You can connect with people in government and ask them to have a coffee. The worst they can say is no, sorry, I'm busy. I've met with students over time or someone has said, Nikki, would you meet with my PhD students? So please don't all email me that question. But I guess I'm happy to spend some time helping others because people have helped me. So I think making those connections, it doesn't mean you'll get a job now, but if in a year's time a job came up and I remember you and say, that job would have suited this person, I might flick you an email and say, hey, did you see this? So have a look for graduate programs as well. We do have graduate programs within government. We just closed our soil science graduate program recently, so we'll take on 3 graduates in soil science as well. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of programs. I guess you just have to look for them. Applying for government jobs straight out of uni, I did that and I failed miserably. So I'm sure it works for some people, but I applied for so many government jobs when I finished my PhD. And like I said, I didn't get any of them and my friend got me a job. So yeah, make friends. That's the other thing.
Maybe a follow-on to that. So there are a lot of PhD students who are interested in the industry placement, so it extends their scholarship a bit. Is there any arrangements that you're thinking about maybe formally under the MOU where there is some process, like formal process for folks who want to work with DETSI to be applying and finding?
Not particularly for that we've spoken about to date, but I guess, the management group are open to ideas. So yeah, Elisa, do you want to jump in?
That the umbrella agreement is a contractual arrangement, and the PhD placements have their own contracts. And so when we first started discussing, we had envisioned an umbrella agreement that included a lot of additional agreements underneath them, but they came out as we went through the negotiating process. And in some ways it's because they are already a fairly straightforward process to be able to do. But in terms of identifying people who could work with people in the government, that's possibly something that we could look more at to be able to make those connections and connect those dots. Yeah.
Oh, one more online.
One more online. I think it's Vicky Martin asking, Nikki, given a lot of your work is about communication and human behaviour to improve environmental outcomes, what is the capacity of your teams to do social science? Is the government looking to build social science in the environmental programs you run?
Yeah, so we have a social science team. It's very small. I'm the director of it at the moment for 3 weeks. So we have 4 people in that team and they do social science on the ground. I'm trying to think of an example. We're looking at the ports and the work we do on our wave buoys in the ports, and that's a social science project with the industry, so who use our ports, particularly up in North Queensland. And I forget the second part of that question. So social science. Oh, yes. Yeah, so we also have established a social science reference group of which Kerry Wilson is the chair. So there's a keen interest from Kerry in social science and environmental outcomes as well. So I don't know a lot about the reference group. I haven't been involved in that, but that they had their first meeting just maybe 2 months ago. So it's very new, but yeah, it sounds like they are keen in that space.
Okay, I think we're going to leave it there, and please join me in thanking Nikki again. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. And feel free to, email me or connect with me on LinkedIn or send me a message. Thank you.